Hello everyone, I'm Meteorologist Carly Smith. We will get started here in just about 3 minutes. So if you're watching this as a replay, skip ahead just 3 more minutes. But we're talking the latest updates to the Hurricane Beryl forecast cone and the latest model trend and guidance and that northward turn everyone's anticipating. That's all coming up. So just wait about 3 more minutes and we'll get started. Thank you everyone for joining. Please don't leave. Post your questions now so I have time to answer them. And thank you again. We'll start here shortly. Hello everyone, I'm Meteorologist Carly Smith. We are tracking Hurricane Beryl. That has been the hot topic. Thank you for joining, everybody. I see a lot of questions coming out about rain. Everyone wants to know how much rain are we going to see. We've got rain out of Jim Wells County for Donnie. Elisa says, how much rain are we expecting? That kind of is the big question, and it really is going to vary based on where in the forecast cone Beryl goes. So let's see, it's not coming to Texas. I think we're going to get some rain, but there is still some caveats to the forecast. So we'll get into it. So first, we will start with our live update, tracking the latest forecast cone, and then we'll get into the rain. So here's the cone, right? And it is approaching Texas. So this has tropical storm force conditions. That was not what I wanted to do yet. Okay, so we need to extend this out. Tropical storm force conditions through much of the Gulf of Mexico. I edited this on a different post, so I need to do it on this one just real quickly so we're not all confused. But this is Thursday, 6 p.m. Excuse me, 6 p.m., 6 a.m., Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Saturday, 6 p.m. Okay, so Thursday, Friday, 6 p.m., Saturday, 6 a.m., Saturday, 6 p.m., Sunday, 6 a.m., then we go Monday, 6 a.m., then we go Tuesday, 7 a.m. So I have all the morning times on the bottom, all the afternoon, evening times on the top. And so essentially what we are looking at is Beryl is weakening. That is the big takeaway from this live update, is it is finally weakening. We've been talking about this weakening that's supposed to happen in the Western Caribbean, and everyone has been like, Carly, it's still a Category 4, it's still a Category 4. And I was like, just wait, just wait. So Beryl is finally interacting with that wind shear in the Western Caribbean. So we have the wind shear. We also are going to have the friction from the Yucatan Peninsula that will decrease Beryl's intensity. That is what happens when these tropical systems go over land. There's drier air, there's not the fuel of the warm Gulf water, and essentially they weaken with the help of friction as well. That creates the wind shear, which tropical systems do not like. So this is the latest forecast cone. There is a trend more north, and the forecast cone still has two very opposite scenarios that could play out. And so we're going to go straight into this graphic that I started making yesterday, one that showed this, but Chief Meteorologist Alan Holt, he's the chief for a reason. He did a fantastic job making this graphic yesterday. So there are still two possible scenarios. The one that's kind of on the northern end of this cone, really I could add a third scenario at this point with just the latest trends that we've been dealing with, but there's still two scenarios. Avenue A, the high is a little bit farther east, and so in the plains there's a trough, and that trough is that low pressure with the jet stream, and that acts kind of as a magnet that's going to want to pull Beryl to the north. And that's why there is that turn to the north. It's going to go more north-northwest once it gets into more of the western Gulf. And so that pulls it up toward that trough, that low pressure system. And so it's going to spend more time in the Gulf of Mexico in this scenario. Beryl will likely be a hurricane at landfall, but the landfall would likely be later. And the latest forecast cone has that northern trend that could be anywhere between, let's say, Aransas Bay to Matagorda Bay to closer to Houston would be that northern trend. And so that far northern trend actually could still keep us with a lack of rainfall, and that actually would probably wind up being our worst case scenario. Somewhere in the middle, kind of a better case scenario, but one of the best scenarios is kind of where the National Hurricane Center has their center of their track, right? So the center of the forecast cone track is essentially their forecast, but again, there is still about 150 miles of error within day 4 of a forecast cone, and that's where we're sitting right now. Today is Thursday, July 4th. Happy Independence Day, by the way, everyone. But today is Thursday. So this is day 1. Friday is day 2. Saturday is day 3. Sunday would be day 4, and right now it's not looking like a landfall would be Sunday night. Could be a landfall there into the far southern Mexico side of the trend. So this little notch right here is, if you watch Alan's updates also, I'm trying to find a pointer arrow. This isn't the best one, but we'll make it work. So this little notch, it's right here. That's where Tampico, Mexico is. So they're out of the forecast cone at this point. Again, the cone is only indicating where the center of the storm will go. So that is essentially the worst wind speeds, right? So the strongest wind is right at the center of the storm. However, that doesn't indicate where you get the tornado threat, or you get the flooding threat, or you get the high wind threat. But of course, it's the northern side of the cone, or the northern side of the storm, that tends to be the worst. The north right quadrant, that front right quadrant, depending on the direction that it's headed. So sometimes with a more easterly landfall, where it's moving east to west, essentially, that's what I meant by easterly, but it's really more of a westerly landfall. That would be the north side of the storm. And if it is moving more north at landfall, that would then be the east side of the storm, right? So anyway, let's delete that arrow and zoom back out. So the forecast cone is now well north of, not well north, but it's north of Tampico. That's not included in the cone anymore. We have areas just south of the valley, so some of these cities in Mexico included in the cone. And then Brownsville kind of starting to get a little bit more attraction from the National Hurricane Center as a possibility for landfall at Category 1 hurricane strength, which would be 75-mile-per-hour winds. And then it does show it quickly weakening as it moves inland. And so a couple of scenarios that are starting to play out more is it makes that landfall somewhere still south of Brownsville, but turns north. And that actually would be a decent scenario for us when it comes to rainfall. But let's go back to this graphic. So Avenue A means landfall would be a little bit later. I would say more central Avenue A would bring us more impacts. Far eastern Avenue A, we would have less impacts. Then Avenue B, see how the forecast cone has changed even from last night? That's crazy how far north it's drifted. I didn't edit this graphic from Alan. This is how it was drawn last night, and so it actually is working in favor of showing that the trend is more northern at this point. So we also can do the spaghetti plot, right? I think it depends. George asked, will Corpus Christi provide public evacuation buses to San Antonio or Austin if Beryl is headed away? I think it depends on the strength of Beryl and how big of a need that is. If the city issues an evacuation order, which they have not done yet, by the way, let me just emphasize that, that's when they would provide some sort of public transportation that would help you evacuate if you needed it. But we are not there yet. We are not there yet. I have the system freezing up again, and that is not a good thing. I really don't want to call our software IT right now. I just want to do this live. But it's hard to answer some of these questions. So let's talk rainfall. We'll just do that while I let the computer think here for a second. Rainfall. So a lot of people are asking rainfall questions. It is still very forecast track dependent, and there's still, again, about 150-mile or kilometer, technically, radius of uncertainty at this point. And so that changes big time the amount of rain that we would see. Unfortunately, it's still not ironed down, but a lot of the modeling data, we do have a risk from the Weather Prediction Center that has us at a slight risk of heavy rainfall in the coastal bend. At this point, with more of a direct impact possibly to Brownsville, it is looking like, or the valley, it is looking like they would see higher rainfall totals that could be up to 6 inches. However, if there is the ability for northern turn even after landfall, then that would provide the coastal bend with up to 6 inches. So on one of my graphics, I put a high-end rainfall total, which would extend a little bit past so landfall is looking like it would be somewhere between the 7th and the 8th. So that's Sunday or Monday. If it goes a little bit more east than expected, it could wind up being Tuesday, but Sunday or Monday would be landfall. Sunday would be a more Mexico landfall. Monday would be a more Texas landfall. And essentially, with the Mexico landfall, it still could turn north, and a lot of the model data is picking up on that this morning, and after it makes landfall. And so that would provide us with some rainfall. And so the trends between all the high resolution models have gone up on, or not high resolution, the low resolution long range models have gone up on rainfall totals. So right now we're looking at, from the Weather Prediction Center, 4 to 5 inches of rainfall. The further west you live, it's trending a little less, but that could change or shift based on where the system does make landfall. And so it is really dependent upon that, unfortunately. We don't have all the answers still today, but I will say rainfall is trending up. I would say high-end rainfall would be 6 inches. Low-end rainfall still could be just a few tenths of an inch, but that scenario is trending down. And so that's that far southern track where it doesn't turn north at all. I think there is going to be a north turn, whether that's after it hits land or before it hits land, is trending to be a little bit more of the question. I'm reading through some of your questions. Well, corporate, oh wait, I already got that one. Will it strengthen in the Gulf? So yes, we are looking at, I'm gonna have to Control-Alt-Delete this because it's still not loading. Well, Mary asked, will it strengthen in the Gulf? And yes, it is likely going to re-strengthen. All of the data is indicating that it would be Category 1. There was a rogue model in one of the runs that did have it go back up to Category 2. And yes, you can't argue Beryl has been trending stronger than anticipated, but not by much overall. It was expected to be a really strong hurricane when the first forecast model came out, and that's what we got. Category 5 was not in the first forecast, but I believe Category 4 was. So we are, as this hurricane continues to be a hurricane, and we get more and more data from the hurricane hunters, the planes that fly into this hurricane, that essentially gives us more and more confidence and more numbers to add into our forecast models, and more kind of changes to how we're inputting the data or variables we're leaning on to make the forecast a little bit more accurate as we continue on down the road. So yes, while it's been trending a little bit higher than the forecast, all of that's being reaccounted for as we keep issuing new data. And so the newest data is always going to be the more accurate for that reason. So we do still anticipate a strengthening in the Gulf of Mexico, and that does have a lot to do with the wind shear. So we finally have seen, we got some graphics back, so I'm going to take a break from being on camera. We finally have seen wind shear starting to weaken Beryl, and that's what's happening right now as we speak, as it has passed over Jamaica and continues through the Cayman Islands. The latest forecast cone right there, a little bit further north in the Yucatan Peninsula area, they kind of anticipated yesterday. So this has Cozumel still in the cone with a chance of direct landfall down toward a little bit further south, Tulum, Mexico, kind of a good idea of where landfall might go there on the Yucatan Peninsula. Then as it crosses into the Gulf, there's still a lot of wind shear. So this is all of the wind shear into Friday evening. So by Friday evening, once the storm is in the Gulf, the modeling is going to get better. We're going to have a better grasp on what this trough right here, look at all that wind, how deep this trough is into, so that's essentially the jet stream, how deep this trough is. Now this is the deeper, is a deeper trough. I'm going to see if the computer won't freeze when I go to edit this, so we can compare the GFS and the Euro model. So now they're both showing a very similar Steepness, I think, is a good way to say it. If you ride roller coasters, I like to talk about troughs as the downhill part of the roller coaster. And so that's kind of when things are at their craziest, right? At the top of the roller coaster, things are calmer. That's when high pressure is dominating. And then at the bottom, that's when you're going really fast and you feel crazy on the roller coaster. And so the crazier weather happens at the bottom of the trough. Technically, it happens on the uphill part of the trough, if you really want to get technical. And then my analogy doesn't really work that great, but the low pressure indicates the stormy weather. So we are seeing a cold front that will bring a chance of some severe storms across portions of the plains and then into the Midwest later on this week. And that's also going to be a mechanism that attracts Beryl, essentially. It kind of acts like a magnet and will pull Beryl to the north around the edge of that high pressure over the west. So this scenario, they both look very similar. So this is the GFS and this is the Euro, and there's not a lot of difference, which has more model congruency at this point on Friday. So right now we're still at the GFS. I'm going to zoom back out. Back to Euro, back to Euro. Let's let it load. So now this is Sunday. GFS, Euro, GFS, Euro. Very little difference in the model data. Then Monday, you get a deepening of the trough on the Euro, and that's what's going to pull it north. And by it, I mean Beryl. So that's Monday. I still remember everyone wants to talk rainfall totals. We'll talk about them. So I'm sorry if you're waiting for that, because I haven't purposely put it off, but I'm analyzing. So 10 a.m. is when a lot of the new data comes out. Some of our newer weather models are starting to put out their newest model run also. So it's just a lot of new data out at 10 a.m., but I want to give you the information as soon as it comes out with the new forecast cone and latest update on the current conditions of the tropical system. That all happens at 10 a.m. So I try to get on as fast as I can so you can get all the latest updates as they're happening, which is sometimes hard on me, but I think it's beneficial for you, and so that is why I do it. But anyway, I got distracted. I need to change this back to GFS. So that was the Euro you just looked at. I'm sorry if this is confusing to anybody. So even here, that's still a high right there. So that's interesting. So they both, the Euro's trough is actually looking a little stronger than the GFS, which is interesting because before this point, the European was trending much further south than the GFS, and now the Euro trough is looking like it's going to get a cutoff low, which would be interesting also. So this is the GFS. GFS, Euro, GFS, Euro. Overall, very similar. And so you see on, well, the spaghetti plots is what made this one a freeze, so I'm kind of scared to show it. Okay, I never put the spaghetti plots on here, so hold on, don't look at that. Okay, we're gonna try to play it, fingers crossed. Okay, so a lot of consistency now across the Yucatan and really across the Gulf. So all of these models are now trending north of Soto La Marina. I believe I said that right, closer to Brownsville, so somewhere between Brownsville and Soto La Maria. An interesting tidbit, the HMON has been doing a pretty good job at performing. Some of the latest indications have it a little bit less impressive, but that's the one that's tracking toward the coastal bend. So let me find the GFS. So there's the GFS and the euro. Let me point these out. So right here is the GFS. It's this. There's two that are kind of green. They're both similar, are going on similar paths, but this lighter blue teal color, that's the GFS. So it's trending a little bit more straight before it turns. And the European is still trending farther south than the GFS, but they're both much more consistent than they have been. And this has landfall Sunday evening with almost every model run actually, which is crazy. This is kind of the first time I've seen this much consistency in the data since I've been doing these lives. And I think that's what makes these lives helpful, hopefully to you, is in real time you're seeing how the data is evolving and why we're becoming more confident as it moves on. So I hope this helps and it doesn't just hinder anything or make it more confusing. But this is where there's still a difference. So the European is still turning north, but it doesn't do the, wow, it like hovers over there. It doesn't do the curve around the high like a couple of the other models are doing, but the GFS actually isn't doing that either. This is interesting because that will play a role in how much rain we see, is whether they turn up around the edge of this high to the east or whether they tap into the high on the west. That is now the question after it makes landfall, but it does look like a landfall somewhere between, let me go back. Somewhere between, I mean, you could argue somewhere between Corpus Christi and Soto La Marina is in Mexico is possible, and that's about where it is, and that's a radius of, yeah, again, I'm saying this out loud, but I'm not saying this as a guarantee, like a legit forecast. It's still way too far out to be saying this is exactly where it's gonna hit land. There's still way too much uncertainty, so I feel like I'm acting too confident, and I wanna backtrack a little bit. But this is still 269 miles of difference at this point, and so yeah, that just emphasizes any shift in that is going to play a big role in how much rain we do end up seeing. So the first rainfall forecast between kind of myself and Alan, he started putting it out yesterday, but it was still a little early to show it. But this is kind of the first rainfall forecast with more confidence of landfall closer to Brownsville versus Corpus Christi. That would have higher rainfall totals there versus here. But if there is a turn north, that would bring rain into the area Tuesday and Wednesday for us, which would boost our rainfall totals for the middle of the week. But right now, this is what it's looking like for the 7th and the 8th. We can look at I don't think I saved this graphic, which is unfortunate. Okay, I have a graphic that explains your question, Adela, so we will get there. But I am having computer technical difficulties right now, which is so fun. Dolores, I love the Batman roller coaster. Yeah, Joe, the forecast on Friday is going to be a game changer. Once it crosses into the Gulf of Mexico, it should be much easier to be confident in something at this point. But thank you, Joe, for your kind words as well. Can you please explain, Dustin says, can you please explain why the high pressure systems have a pull on the storm? So essentially they're steering winds. So naturally, air actually kind of flows from high to low pressure, but around the edge of a high is where you get stronger winds because the wind is really weak around the center of the high. But around the edge of the high, you get these winds that flow around the edge of the high, and those are typically our steering winds when it comes to tropical systems. One that is really well known, that is the Bermuda high. And that one is typically one that sits up over Bermuda and then steers hurricanes or tropical systems up and down the Atlantic coast. And we love it when the Bermuda high sits up. Not necessarily love it, but it keeps a lot of storms typically away from South Texas because they're getting turned to head up toward the Atlantic versus head into the Gulf of Mexico. So I guess it depends on where we are in the season and how much rain we want. But let me find a graphic that I want to show before it freezes again. So I updated this one this morning. Okay, here it is. So these are not exact numbers. I just put like 1 or 2 numbers on here, but this is our 3 weather impact. So heavy rain, high-end rainfall amounts would be 6 inches. Low-end rainfall amounts are still around 1/10 of an inch, and it's still a little too far out to say one way or another which one it's going to end up being. Right now, the higher rainfall is trending further south, but with the northern turn, even inland, that would bring us more rain across much of the coastal bend. Damaging wind, high end 70 miles per hour. So at category 1, that's 74 mile per hour winds. I don't see a direct landfall in the coastal bend, but if we were to get that, we would have 74 mile per hour winds possible. But without it being direct for us, 70 is kind of on the high end. More likely, we see kind of tropical storm force, at least wind gusts, which would be about 45 miles an hour. The main impacts, which we talked a lot about this yesterday, is we are anticipating dangerous surf, and then tornadoes are going to be possible. So these are kind of, I put a high end and a low end, or a high end and a likely, just so you can prepare for the worst, because I do think that that is important to know. Even this far out, even though there's still a lot of uncertainty in the forecast, it is important information, and so I'm doing my best to analyze everything and give you the best forecast that I can. So here's the latest tropical storm wind probability. Please load. I probably should delete the spaghetti model out of my show because that seems to be the one that's causing the most issues, or it's had issues since it froze on that one. But we're starting to see a little bit more confidence in tropical storm force winds there for Brownsville. So they're up to, or the valley, more so Padre Island, South Padre Island, but they're up to a 40 to 50% chance of tropical storm force winds. Areas closer to the coastal bend are starting to get more so a 20 to 30% chance. So that's why I put gusts around 45 miles per hour, because tropical storm force starts at 39 miles per hour. So I think 30 or 40 to 45 mile per hour wind gust is something that we should be ready to see pretty much in any scenario. But the higher end scenario would have hurricane force winds potentially headed for the coastal bend, but it's still too early to say, like, yes, we are definitely going to get those hurricane force winds. I think right now it's more so tropical storm force gusts are pretty likely. And that can change, and it likely will change. And tomorrow I might be sitting here saying something totally different. I just want to be transparent about that. But yes, rain. Let's see if I can get the rain data to load. So actually, we'll just show this one. This is usually kind of an in-between of both the models from the Weather Prediction Center. And so this goes out through Wednesday, which would include a northern turn. So this is, I would say at this point in the forecast, this is a high-end amount of rainfall for us, which does go up to possibly 5 inches there. But 4 inches would be the higher end, all the way down to about an inch or less the further west and northwest you go. And this is, again, this is the Weather Prediction Center's forecast. Right now, the last forecast as a team effort between myself and Alan looks still a bit different, but that's because we're not totally sold on that northern turn. But once I talk to him later today, we might be. Because a lot more of the data is showing that. But, and again, a lot of that rain from the Weather Prediction Center probably will fall Tuesday and Wednesday. So if we get a northern turn, that puts a chance, if it hits south of Brownsville and then turns north, our rain and our wind would be more so Tuesday and Wednesday. But if it hits north of Brownsville, we would have the wind and the rain Sunday and Monday. And I think that is a little bit more confidence at this point, is it hits south of Brownsville. So July 7th and 8th, Sunday and Monday, there's not a ton of rain. But then if it starts turning north after it makes landfall, then we are going to wind up with higher rainfall totals. And so that is now becoming a bit more of the uncertainty at this point. Alan Holt can't work 24 hours a day, Maria, no matter if we want him to or not. Hey, Janine, I don't know if you remember me, but I used to work in the Dayton area, so I am hoping everyone stays safe down here in the coastal bend. Okay, here's the wind. Okay, these are probabilities. I think I have this in my show. So this is kind of the radius now. So this is a radius of over 200 miles an hour. Or I mean, not 200 miles an hour. Whoa, let's slow down. 228 miles. So 200 to 250 miles is the radius of the wind. So here's a look at the forecast for the radius of the wind. Here. So this would mean like I said, the gusts become more likely. Strong in tropical storm to Cat 1 hurricane still expected Brownsville south. But tropical storm force could extend a bit further north, and at this point, the latest forecast data showing where we would wind up more so with the tropical storm force gust versus tropical storm force sustained winds. And this is the latest forecast wind field that is issued by the National Hurricane Center. And their forecast, actually, the accuracy, I wanted to post this earlier this morning, but I got distracted, and then Alan beat me to it. But the forecast accuracy for the National Hurricane Center has actually been pretty well on the track of this cone. So they have been off or so by about 100 kilometers, which is pretty impressive. That's, yeah. I am impressed by that. I will say that. That's 120 or 20 hours out, which is crazy to think about. But what you see here is more so tropical storm force winds expected. This again could shift. So if it does wind up on the northern end of that forecast cone, we would see this over the coastal bend. If it ends up a little bit further south in that forecast cone, we would see less of it. So let's put the cone on here. So there's the cone, right? So if it goes further north, this little yellow circle and orange circle would be closer to the coastal bend. If it stays further south, we would have minimal impacts when it comes to wind. So again, it's called the cone of uncertainty for a reason. We're still 4 days out, 3-4 days out at this point. So it's still more so a prepare for the worst. Start making time for your preparations, but not necessarily acting on them. And yeah, I hope I answered some questions. I think the rainfall, we'll put up this graphic again, and then we'll end this live update. This is partially me just thinking out loud, but the high-end rainfall would be 6 inches. Earliest that would come is through Tuesday. Latest that would come is through Wednesday. So damaging wind, likely going to stay to our south. The high end is on the really high end. If it does reach Category 1, the area right around the eye is what would see that. The area further out, which is more so what we would see, I think tropical storm force gusts are more likely. So that's why I put likely a gust 45 miles an hour. And that's still kind of on a high end right now for the coastal bend. Dangerous surf still expected. I've talked a lot about the surf forecast. I hope everyone understands that that is going to start to increase. I will put up this, since it is 4th of July, by the way, happy 4th of July Independence Day, everyone. So I showed this during first edition. So here's our beach forecast, where we are looking at hot conditions, extreme UV index, waves right now 2 to 3 feet every 4 seconds. They do fall Friday and Saturday. Then once Beryl crosses into the Yucatan, our swell is going to pick, our period in between swells is going to pick up. So we'll see about a 12-second period, which increases our rip current risk on Saturday, but doesn't make for rough surf. So you're going to want to get in the water, but it's going to be super important to have a buddy system and be aware that rip currents are going to be possible, even though the conditions look really nice. Then Sunday, Monday is when we could be dealing with some inundations, some coastal flooding, and additionally, that's the rough, crazy surf, right? So that's 5 to 8 feet. Could trend higher depending on the exact path of Beryl, but right now we're going 5 to 8 feet every 8 seconds, which is messy. You really want a period that's well longer than the peak height of your wave in order to enjoy surfing out in those conditions. So overall, this is looking messy at this point. Then we see 3 to 5 foot waves. So this is also important, and I don't know how Alan's been handling this, but I keep some surf in the forecast with a pickup in the period, because we are going to see tropical wave invest in 96L move into the Gulf of Mexico as well into next week. So Beryl's going to hit, and then we're going to see another wave. Right now, it's not forecast to have a great chance of becoming a tropical system. It's only at 20%, but it is going to throw up some wave action. So you'll see that here. Beryl comes in. Here's the wave forecast, which has some of the highest waves trending. I said trending higher. The trends are higher in the coastal bend with 8 to 12 foot swells possible in this particular forecast model. I'm keeping it lower and a bit conservative. But that's with Cat 1 strength making landfall right south of the coastal bend, closer to the Rio Grande Valley. Then as we continue, look at this swell right here. So this is another uptick in surf. That would be the second system producing those swells. And then past that, there's a chance for another little low that tries to develop in the Bay of Campeche as we head into Friday. So a couple of different swells that are anticipated in the Gulf of Mexico, keeping our wave action a little rough, keeping offshore fishing a little hazardous, lots of up and down conditions. I definitely wouldn't suggest. So here's a couple of takeaways. Takeaway number one, Padre Island National Seashore, fairly fine through Saturday, but by Sunday, I think you would want to be off of the National Seashore. That's when conditions can quickly change. So Sunday, definitely don't want to be camping on the beach Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. This second system that comes through is looking weaker, but it could provide a little bit of some higher wave action and higher swells and a more dangerous rip current also. So a lot to consider and think about. We are only in July of hurricane season that lasts until October 31st. So even if you do all of these preps and prepare for the worst, and let's say nothing happens here, right? It stays far south and we barely see anything, or it skirts north toward Houston, which still isn't out of the question at this point, then, at least you have everything prepared for the rest of hurricane season, because right now we are in the target zone. We're in the path that all these storms are still coming because of where the high pressure sets up and those steering winds around the edge of the high setup. So yeah, it's not a great scenario, but it's where we're at, and we're lucky to live on the coast. I truly believe that. So some Beryl thoughts. Alan and I basically using these same thoughts. So have your plan ready to go. Still not quite time to act on the more heavy things like boarding up. Timing Sunday or Monday, but the rain could even trend Tuesday to Wednesday. So keep up with the current forecast. And then we are very much anticipating increased surf on area beaches, especially Sunday and Monday. So I'm going to end it there. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for commenting and interacting. And if I see any comments as I'm scrolling through afterward that seem urgent and need an answer, I will do my best to answer them. But don't forget, we have great updates. So I posted in the comments a link to our Hurricane Central page. You can also download the KIII.com app, and you can watch these live updates there between myself or Alan in the evening. We also have our weekend team coming in on the weekend, which does include meteorologist Faith Colbert and meteorologist Kristen Wallace. So Faith will be in the mornings, Kristen in the evenings. They'll be doing live updates, I'm sure, as well, and so we will adjust as needed based on the path also. We're fully staffed and fully ready to be with you through this event, but for now we're in the cone, and so it is important to remain, on alert and keep up to date with the latest updates. But the big takeaway and the positive thing from today is that Beryl is weakening. It is interacting with shear. It's going to keep the shear in the Gulf of Mexico right until it's about to make landfall, and that's when we start to lose some of that shear, and it could increase to a Category 1 storm. So thank you for watching. I'm meteorologist Carly Smith.